Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. And we're very pleased that we have Dillan Patel here with us today from the DOER, the Department of Environmental Resources, who is our coordinator for the Green Communities program, and also will be for the Climate Leaders program, I believe. And if Lincoln is accepted, which we hope Lincoln will be. And the purpose of today's meeting was really to go over a better sort of understanding for the CFREE committee and the GEC members who are on it of what the Green Communities program entails, what it represents in terms of opportunities for funding and so forth for the town and grant opportunities, and just have a general discussion about that and some Q&A. And Dylan and I have gone through a little bit of that in advance, and so we'll sort of ask Dylan to give a rundown on the program, and then we'll go right into sort of questions and answers that we've sort of teed up, and then questions you all have. And without further discussion, Dylan, we welcome you.
Thank you so much, Scott. And oh, I like the animation there. And thank you to the members of the CFREE program. I see a lot of participants actually, so this is very exciting. So Scott, I assume I can share my screen. All right, thank you. So as Scott Rodman was mentioning, I am the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Division under the Department of Energy Resources. I'm here today to talk about a brief history of the Green Communities Program, how we're evolving, both in terms of the department and also within the Green Communities Division, and to talk about some of the grant opportunities that are available to Lincoln. So the table of contents basically gives an overview of what I just said. So I just want to start off with DOER's mission. We recently went through a rebranding exercise in which we developed a new mission statement, which is to create a clean, affordable, resilient, and equitable energy future for everyone in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Department of Energy Resources is really tasked with formulating energy policy for the Commonwealth. We support the clean energy goals in response to climate change, and also to transition our energy supply to a lower, cleaner emission portfolio, reducing our energy demand and improving our energy system infrastructure for resiliency. And we do this through several mechanisms, which can include grant making, policy, regulation, and planning. So to give an overview of the Green Communities program, we were set up under the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2008. I think that was under then Governor Patrick. And we were basically operational by 2010. In 2010, we had the first green communities enter our cohort. One of them was Lincoln, which I'll kind of touch into in the next slide. And since I think we had like maybe 14 or 15 in the first ever year, and now we're up to 297. We're probably going to breach the 300 mark this year. There is at least 2 in my region that are going to be green communities. So and I guess just to back up a little bit, green communities, since we've grown so much, there are 4 regional coordinators now. We serve different parts of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I am the Northeast Regional Coordinator. I'm joined by 3 very lovely colleagues who serve the Southeast, the Central, and the Western part of the state. And you can imagine that, before we just needed 1 or 2, and now we need 4 of us to manage the nearly 300 green communities across the Commonwealth. So we are a grant program that's funded through what's known as the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or what's also known as RGGI. RGGI is a kind of cap and trade mechanism for power generation across, I believe it's 13 states. I can't remember if Pennsylvania is part of it still. But essentially, fossil fuel generators across basically most of the mid and upper Atlantic states pay into this mechanism, and the different states that participate have different rules about how they can allocate that kind of funding. So there are 5 criteria to become a green community. That those 5 criteria have stayed the same in the past 15 years. Um, and once those 5 criteria are met by an applicant, an aspirational green community, we provide a one-time designation grant, which is based on a formula in which the parameters include population, certain health characteristics, as well as certain environmental justice characteristics. The Green Communities program provides funding, and that's usually designed to increase the energy efficiency of its municipal operations, since we are a program that's designed only for municipal use. And that's to increase energy efficiency for existing buildings, the town's vehicle stock, and public street lights or public traffic lights. And so far, since in our history, we've awarded just under $54 million in grants. And I'll get to how much we actually allocate each year in the following slides. So like I said, the town of Lincoln was one of the first green communities back in 2010. It received a $140,000 designation grant, serving its town hall, its library, and its K-8 school. It's since then been awarded 5 competitive grants. And so the total of those competitive grants plus the designation grants is 622,000. I will say that we have a kind of break in our grant making program. And maybe I might get to that in the following slides actually. So hold that thought. So Lincoln has actually done a fantastic job. I can't really compare it to any of the municipalities. I haven't kind of done that analysis, but I would say it's gone probably in the top 5 to 10 percentile in how much it has actually reduced its energy usage compared to its baseline. So like I said, Lincoln was one of the first green communities. So we kind of track its energy use compared to 2009 or fiscal year 2009, which means it's had a long time to kind of reduce those emissions compared to some other newer green communities. But having said that, it's still done a very good job compared to some other towns in its cohort. So it's kind of reduced its energy use by just over a third. You can see on the slide that back in fiscal 2009, it used about 27,000 MMBTUs, 28 nearly, and it's reduced that to 18,000 MMBTUs in the last complete fiscal year. It's also gone further than many other municipalities, being one of only 10 communities that have been part of the fossil fuel free pilot, which, at some point there may or may not be an expansion of that program. That the energy use translates to a much lower energy use intensity for municipal buildings. So EUI is a metric that kind of helps do apples to apples with any kind of building, really. It's how much energy usage in British thermal units per square foot. So it normalizes based on the area of the building. And so, across the state, if you kind of average out your most energy intensive uses like schools to your least energy intensive uses like a shed, that kind of averages out to about 88. Whereas in Lincoln, given the fact that it has that long history of energy efficiency measures, has reduced it to 49. 49 generally is known, or anything below 50 is generally known as very high highly energy efficient building. And of course, we're talking about averages here. So we might be thinking about some net zero buildings with some maybe higher use buildings. But even then, it's still very admirable. All right. So I think we're going to get into the meat of green communities here. So our main grant program is just our competitive grant program. We get 15 million a year to allocate. That's likely, something that's on the higher level compared to in previous years. Obviously, we had much fewer green communities in the past. So 15 million is what our most recent allocation amounts are. Those are split over two funding rounds, one in the spring, one in the fall. So we generally try to have awards of 7.5 million per round, right? Applications can be annually. Well, a town can apply annually, but it cannot be awarded twice in a year. Okay. So you can only do spring or the fall. And they cannot be concurrent, which means that a municipality may not have an existing grant when it applies, or several weeks before it applies for a new grant. Okay. So you can imagine that very few towns actually do get to apply every year. Some do because they might have such small projects, but in general, municipalities tend to apply every other year. Our funding allowances are 225,000. Um, Again, in general, there are differences. So most municipalities can apply for up to $225,000. We have extra funding available for projects that target environmental justice populations. That gets you up to 250,000, so 25,000 bonus. Municipalities that have a cumulative competitive funding amount of $1 million are then limited to 125. So you can, if you remember 2 slides ago when I mentioned that there's like a funding cap. So Lincoln has not met that yet, which is good. But once it crosses $1 million in competitive funding, that goes down to 125K that they can in the future apply for. But like I said, there's still many opportunities before that happens. The grants are provided on a reimbursable basis. So usually what happens is that for a particular measure, or if we're talking about a vehicle for a purchase, the town is invoiced for it, they pay for it, the town pays for it, and then they're reimbursed by green communities. It's a bit more complicated than that in that for like building measures, it's kind of split over 25%, 50%, 25%. So a municipality would get 25% of their funding request up front, which is always great. And then once those invoices kind of come through, those payment details come through to us, we can then release more of the funding and then the rest of the funding once the grant is pretty much finished. A municipality will not receive the final 25% until pretty much everything is complete and everything is paid for by the town first. So in that way, it is a reimbursable grant to to a great extent. The idea of green communities is that it's supposed to be supplemented by mass save incentives. So, in Lincoln's case, with Eversource incentives. So that helps kind of increase the amount of funds that a municipality can get. So usually, a municipality might apply for, $300,000, $350,000 in like the total project cost, of which 225,000 comes from us, green communities, and the remaining, 150,000 comes from Eversource. Again, that's highly dependent on what the activity is, what the energy savings are, and certain policies that Mass Save or Eversource might have. So the kind of activities that we do fund, so those that projects that can apply up to the maximum amount include building weatherization, so insulation, heat pumps, no matter what source they come from. Generally, you can fund air source heat pumps with them. I don't imagine a ground source heat pump being funded with 250K, unless it's a small building, maybe. Hot water heat pumps or like domestic water heat pumps, retro commissioning, repairs to renewable energy. So in most cases, this is solar photovoltaic. Although, some municipalities do own a wind turbine. Streetlights, outdoor streetlights, indoor LED lights, but only at schools. We only limited to educational facilities, and energy management systems. There are others, including like refrigeration technologies, that I've included in here. There is like another kind of group of activities that we can fund, but they have caps on their funding, so you can't apply up to the maximum amount. So hybrids and EVs range from, I believe, $5,000 to $15,000. It's the lower end if you're doing a hybrid or if you're leasing, and it's the higher end if you're purchasing and it's an EV. And we also provide, more funding for like heavy duty or medium duty vehicles as well. So that's the kind of range. Weather stripping, we only provide funding per linear foot of that weather stripping, so it's like $24 per linear foot. Fridge controls, charging stations. Charging stations we limit to 7,500, so that can probably get you like a level 2. And variable frequency drives, those and that funding varies by the amount of horsepower output of the drive. So you can't apply for the entire 225 for that, but whatever prescriptive funding that we do have gets you almost all the way there. We have one last category under our competitive grant. This is a highly competitive program. Oh, sorry, not program. This is a highly competitive carve out that's under our regular Green Communities umbrella and under the actual program opportunity notice, the actual grant package. And that's called our decarbonization grant. Our decarbonization grants became available, I think, back in 21, and they provide $500,000 for comprehensive energy efficiency and decarbonization works for a single building. Okay, they can't be spread over the portfolio. So these can include like very high level, very deep energy efficiency measures like insulation, maybe upgrading the energy monitoring system, but the majority of it will go to replacing some or all of the hot water heating system or the HVAC system, for example, with heat pumps. These tend to be paired, not always, but they tend to be paired with wider renovations that's outside of green communities that might be funded. So the town might go and have dedicated funding to renovate its library or its town hall or a school or whatever. With that renovation, they might also be thinking about, especially if they have to bring up to code, they might be thinking about changing its HVAC heating system, and maybe it's also end of life, so it's just a really good time. This provides supplemental funding to whatever the town has already dedicated for that. So it's a great opportunity if a town can find something like that. A slightly less, I would say, well-known grant that we have is called META. This is our Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grant. So this provides funding for a consultant or a vendor to conduct engineering and, assessment studies. So this is a really good kind of technical assistance opportunity that can help prepare for future grant opportunities, because our competitive grant requires certain levels of documentation to be eligible or to apply for it. So we would need like, especially for our building level measures. So that can include drawings. It can include like the energy saving calculations, like a proposal by the vendor, the financial cost of it, um, and like the technical documentation such as specification sheets. Meta can help with that. So it can provide like the engineering docs for like heat pump systems or like for HVAC right at the bottom. It can provide assessments for doing on-site solar with a battery backup or community solar. So just understanding how much you could probably put for that canopy, how much output you would get given like the insulation, the shading that's available, the connections to the grid, energy resiliency. So you can think about like microgrid systems for or sheltering systems, understanding what you can get out from retro commissioning. So being able to do a high level study for a certain building, seeing kind of where the louvers are, where the set points are, and then that gives you an idea of what you can tinker with, what you can change to optimize the efficiency of your heating system. If you have, well, not if, but for water treatment plants or wastewater treatment plants, we do like energy efficiency assessments because those tend to have different energy needs. Obviously, their energy uses is kind of is more directly related to throughput of water or sewage. But just understanding like where can we, if we can put variable frequency drives in there, if we could even put in like a water source heat pump, utilizing the energy, the heat from wastewater. And then, for municipalities that are possibly exploring an energy service performance contract with a energy with an ESCO and an energy service company, we can provide funding for an owner's agent, so someone to act on the town's behalf for negotiating and monitoring the ESCO. Okay. So, as you may all be aware, we recently launched the Climate Leaders Program um, in 23, late 23, and now it is starting to be rolled out. So, as there are 5 criteria for green communities, there are also 5 criteria for climate leaders. So, and I've kind of put them at the bottom here. So, having a clean energy committee, so that includes the Green Energy Committee, well, the Lincoln Green Energy Committee or CFREE, so that's a yes. The municipal decarbonization commitment, so you have a climate action plan. Having a decarbonization roadmap, which is currently in progress, that the town of Lincoln has received consultant support for that. A zero emission vehicle first policy, and specialized stretch code adoption, or for the case of Lincoln, fossil fuel free is also is even better actually. So with that 5 criteria, we provide consultant support to do the high level roadmap, which, like I said, you're doing right now. The decarbonization roadmap is a planning document. It is nothing that commits the town to anything. It just provides a dovetail with your capital planning process to identify what buildings might be prioritized based upon the expected life of their various energy equipment. So the expected life of their boilers, the HVAC, the hot water systems, the roof even. So this basically provides like a comprehensive understanding of where your facilities stand and when and where the town might be thinking about doing a certain decarbonization activity. With the ZEV policy, I do want to highlight because we do get some confusion about this. The ZEV policy is a purchasing policy. It does not require the town to purchase only electric vehicles especially if it does not have the infrastructure for it. It requires that the town consider purchasing an electric vehicle if such options are feasible and commercially available, and with a, I'm going to caveat this. We don't really have any language about life cycle costs or financial costs in the ZEV policy, but it is something, we understand that municipalities, that is the first priority, financial considerations. So, I always talk to my towns that, we have Green Communities does have that funding available for, and there's also more EV and others, um, to help with electric vehicle purchases. But even if that were not commercially or technically feasible for the town, or it just not does not meet the operational needs, say that, Lincoln needs a snowplow, we then kind of encourage through the ZAV policy consideration of hybrids, whether that's plug-in hybrid, regular hybrids, or the like, and even certain fuel cell technologies if they become available. And then our climate leaders requires recertification every 3 years. That basically requires the town to revisit the roadmap, maybe kind of update some of its progress, and then enact a best practice. I don't have a slide of the best practices here, but they tend to be certain non-energy policies, such as, Tree City USA certification, adopting PACE, some things that, the town may have already done, um, or hosting like a community energy event, helping the residents with awareness of energy efficiency opportunities. So our climate leaders funding is split into two programs. We provide technical assistance, which is $150,000. So you can think about it as like a big version of Meta. These provide very comprehensive assessments of certain technologies, that can that can give the municipality the readiness to apply for an accelerator, our capital funding, or accelerator grant. So you can think about, having the bid documents, the specifications, the wiring designs, an electrical assessment, things of that nature that we would also need in order to kind of review a accelerated grant request. So our capital funding is up to $1 million. And that can go to any of these bullets, so including on-site solar PV. So by on-site, it has to be behind the meter, which serves the building load. It can be for existing buildings, and it can be for new construction if it's all electric, which, in Lincoln, it would have to be. For solar thermal, heat pumps, whether that's air source or ground source, and that $1 million also, obviously gets you a lot further for ground source heat pumps. And for energy storage, so like battery or backups and the like. Right now, this is a one-time grant under our 3-year PON. So a municipality can apply anytime up to 2027, although we do review them in certain periods. And then they have that one award. Now, I don't think I have this in the slides, but I can, something that we were asked and we said yes to is that $1 million can be split up under multiple projects. You know, there are projects out there that are multi-million dollars, but there are certain others that are a few $100,000. So it's really up to the town to figure out what they want to do. But right now, we just have this funding available one time for the next 3 years. After 3 years, and I'm aware this is being recorded, we will figure out what we're going to offer. So just to kind of give a summary of the difference between green communities and climate leaders. So green communities, we do provide the planning assistance to become a green community, which, for your purposes is not relevant. We provide the study grants, which is Meta. which is up to 25,000. And then we provide our competitive grants, which are 225,000 or 500,000 for a decarbonization grant. And that's only for existing buildings and not for renewable energy. For climate leaders, we provide the decarbonization roadmap assistance. Lincoln has just started with that. We provide technical support, which is up to $150,000. And then our climate leaders grants, which is up to $1 million, which can be for new buildings and for solar PV. So just to give like an idea of like a pathway that might be done. So say you might want to do technical support for a ground source heat pump system for your town hall, but a separate grant for PV on a school. So, and this is obviously hypothetical. So this would be for a municipality that applied for climate leader certification back in December. If we're thinking about Lincoln, we could think about like this June, or in the worst case scenario, this December. And so you just have to move it by 6 to 12 months. But you're certified a climate leader community usually 3 months after you apply. You can then apply for technical support actually anytime. And I think we award them several weeks after application. We do encourage municipalities to submit what's known as a notification of intent that they want to apply for the accelerator grant. So this gives us a heads up. So they can do that also anytime, but obviously before they apply for the accelerator grant. So here, this town applies for technical support in May. They're notified in August. The same month, they also apply for the accelerator grant for the solar PV. It takes a few months to review that. They will be awarded in December, and of course, there's some back and forth with contract signing. Between August and February, they do the technical support for the town hall. Now, since they've already applied for the accelerator grant for the solar PV, they cannot apply those funds for the town hall, which means they have to seek exterior funding. But they can do the PV at least with our funding, and they can think about other mechanisms like the IRA tax credit, the alternative energy credits under the state of Massachusetts, and maybe like a town funding for that as well. So I just want to emphasize a few points that green communities is not going to go away now that climate leaders are here. Municipalities that are green communities can continue to apply for green communities funding. Having said that, if you are certified as a climate leader, I cannot guarantee you that if you do apply for a green community grant, that you can also apply for a climate leader grant at the same time. Right now, we do have that exception, but only up until this spring. From this fall, we will kind of decide over the summer. So we have not made that decision yet. And again, like I mentioned this before, climate leaders, you can use that for new buildings, green communities, you cannot. This is my last penultimate slide. So this gives a very good summary of kind of where the town may want to think about applying for green communities / climate leaders funds. So Meta is open right now. I can provide some more details on that, but the deadline for that is coming up very soon on March 7th. I'm going to skip over the RSD grant because I should probably talk about that last. The decarbonization roadmap drafting assistance, that's irrelevant to the town because they've already applied for it and they've already been awarded it. Our competitive grant is due in April, but since Lincoln has an existing grant, it would have to wait until at least October to apply again. And then our technical support is available in May 30th, and we review those in May 30th and November 28th, but technically you can apply anytime. Designation for climate leaders is June 30th or December 31st. So the town would have to submit proof that they've completed all of those criteria, including the roadmap and including the ZEV policy, by June 30th if they want to be in by then. Our only accelerator grant for this year is due on August 1st. In 2026, it will be February and August. But we skipped February because we weren't ready. And then annual reports due November 7th, and that's for every green community. Going back to the regional school district decarbonization grant, so we have that tentatively for September 5th. Again, I am aware this is being recorded. This grant was subject to funding from a federal allocation. I don't know what the status of that. I cannot tell you what the status of that is. But right now we do have it for September 5th. And so if you want to contact me or the Department of Energy Resources, my email is in the bottom left. We also have dedicated mailboxes for different kinds of projects or programs. So we do have a general email inbox. LBER, the Large Building Energy Reporting law was recently not recently, well, relatively recently passed. We recently published regulations for it. So if you want to know more about the large building energy reporting law, we do have a dedicated inbox for that. We also have a dedicated inbox for our solar incentive program known as SMART, as well as our energy code, the stretch code at mass.gov. But that's everything from me. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I can pop it back to anyone for questions.
Dylan, thank you very much. That was huge. That was a huge help. Are those slides something you can send out to us?
I'll send it to you or Colette for distribution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. That's wonderful because I think that's a big help. I think the biggest thing that I had trouble as we were going through the other day when we were having a conversation is on making sure that we understand some of the technical requirements for grants and so forth, such as right now Lincoln has a $5,000 grant for a police vehicle towards a police vehicle, and we need to determine where that stands because we can't apply for anything else until that's closed. Correct?
That applies for any municipality that has an active grant, correct?
And that one's been out that was issued when?
I believe last year.
Okay, so we need to make sure that that's closed out and we figure out what the sort of plan was for that. And maybe it's already been purchased and maybe it just as paperwork hasn't been filed. We don't know. Going back to the grant timing also, I think it's complex. We have the process started for climate leaders because some technical assistance grant has been approved at this point, correct?
So Lincoln is
That's
one of some handful of communities that's undergoing the decarbonization roadmap assistance, right? But our technical assistance grant is available right now, but it's only available for those that are certified as climate leaders.
We would not qualify for being even looking the formal final application for that until after that process has been completed, which is either in June or is
Or
in
December.
December. It's a very tight process to make it by June. It's Power. What is it? Power Options is the company.
Options.
Yeah, that's been selected to be helping us with that process, correct?
Correct. And they estimate, depending on, they believe they can get a roadmap done in 5 weeks, although that's also dependent on them getting all the information that they need from a particular municipality.
Part of our discussion the other day was about what we might be able to do as the volunteer groups to be able to be helpful with them in getting that information in, so it's not all dumped on the town, and primarily Dylan and so forth to do all of, excuse me, Brandon to do all of that information, put that together. So we need to discuss that in a secondary meeting after that. But that might be able to be done so we could push that process along and not be in the December timeframe, but be in the June timeframe.
And that's something that you would have to coordinate with town staff. I do see that Dan has his hand up. Um, I would also kind of underline the fact that it would require in-person visits to certain municipal facilities, which might be more suited to a facility staff, especially
And
for schools, which might have certain, CFREE restrictions.
Dan, you had questions?
I did. Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. And Dillan, thank you as always for being here. I want to just take an opportunity since we're all on the screen. Dillan's been absolutely phenomenal to work with. When I joined in this role, Green Communities was a really complicated concept for me. And since Dillan stepped in, it's really made it much more efficient. And I feel like the town has a much better handle on what we're eligible for. So I just want to take a second to thank him. And then I have just two real quick questions. I wanted to get back to that meta opportunity. There's retro commissioning. We have a community center that is about to break ground. There will be a commissioning process at the end. We're talking fall of 26. Am I to understand that might be an opportunity to reimburse ourselves for the commissioning work, or no?
Unfortunately, no. So retro commissioning would apply to existing buildings. And it's really kind of dedicated for buildings that have like kind of where all of the systems have just gone out of sync. So a really good example is like a school. So when a school is first built, when it's first commissioned, the engineers or the facilities might kind of have the set point so that it turns on at like 7, when the kids are arriving, and it turns off at like 3. But as programs shift, post-COVID world, whatever, there's also like a lot of night activities, right? So the building has to remain on and heated at night. So those kinds of like changing the setbacks, changing the kind of order and sequencing of operations, that's usually what retro commissioning is for.
Understood. Thank you. And my only other, my other quick question, and I think I've asked this before, but we find it a little interesting that essentially all of these grant opportunities, the Green Communities grants, are municipality-wide with the exception of LEDs at the schools. And I wondered if there is any talk of expanding that. That seems oddly restrictive. I wondered if you could explain why.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's going the other way. So we actually had to fight to keep it in. The reason being is that so LEDs tend to have a really, really good payback. And a lot of towns have done LED conversions outside of the school system in the past few years, to the point that it didn't really make sense for us to continue doing that. We only do it for schools because they're obviously larger footprint buildings. Those tend to have higher costs, and there are many school districts across the Commonwealth that still haven't converted. And that obviously leads to an equity issue. It leads to an issue of that, since schools run on their own separate budgets, they're paying for something that could otherwise go to like teacher salaries, which I know is obviously not fungible, but um, the point still stands. The other is that, and again, I'm aware this is being recorded, Eversource has provided indications that at some point in the future, they could be providing what's known as on-bill repayment. National Grid already does this, and it is a wildly popular program. Again, I cannot speak to Eversource. I can, Dan, I can like put you in contact with like Jen or Sarah. But the idea is that Eversource can pay for the LED conversions. They might not be able to incentivize it because the mass save incentives have also changed for schools versus non-schools as well. And that was a fight that we had to put up as well. but they can at least do the financing for it, and then it gets repaid by those energy savings. I don't know what the timeline is for that, but I can put you in touch with an Eversource contact if you're interested.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Dylan. And my only last quick comment, and I just wanted to follow up on that vehicle grant for $5,000 that Scott referenced. We received that in the fall. I guess I wasn't aware. Do we owe you something? I thought that was just a reimbursement for an expense we've already incurred. I just want to make sure we close the loop on that to get it out of the way.
I will follow up with you separately by email
Okay.
for those closeout details.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions? Anyone? Roy?
Hi, Dylan. Thanks for this presentation. It's just amazingly full of information. Slide 14 on the timeline was especially information packed. I wonder if you could walk through that and explain the items that are relevant to Lincoln. It seemed like some of the dates were deadlines for us to submit information. Some dates were when DOER would start work. And I'd particularly like to understand which things we're blocked out of because we're already, we have something going in that category. So if you could just briefly walk through each item and say how it applies to Lincoln, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So the grayed out boxes are just kind of the dates are not applicable because for example, for Meta, there's only one deadline a year. And it was just how I just happened to design the table.
Dylan, hey, can you raise the size of that so we can see it a little bit just by making it full screen? Perfect, thank you.
So Meta is a once yearly grant that's available. And I just happened to make the table in terms of seasons. The RSD grant might be applicable. It's and I forgive my ignorance. It's the Lincoln Concord RSD.
Lincoln Sudbury, yep.
Lincoln Sudbury, okay. So once we have more details on that, I can share that with Dan. We also have the decarbonization roadmap drafting assistance. So that's not relevant for you because you're already doing that. The competitive grant would likely be relevant for you if the town chooses to apply in the fall. The climate leaders communities technical support that becomes relevant once, and I think this should have been swapped out. This becomes relevant once Lincoln becomes a climate leader. So you'll be certified either in June or in December. If you're certified in June, you can then submit an application at any time. We review it in November, right? If you are certified, if you apply for December 31st certification, you can apply for technical support anytime. We'll review it in May. If you all right, and then going back, if you get certified by June, you can then apply for an accelerated grant in August. If you are certified if you apply for certification at the end of the year, you'd have to wait to the following February. Now, with the accelerator grant, I would encourage you to wait. Because this is a very large grant and it's a very capital intensive grant, it's probably something that the town would probably have put a lot of thought to already, but may still need to figure out, other funding requirements, getting the bid documents for like a general contractor or whomever. So it's not something that you could probably just rush into unless you're doing something like solar, which is a bit more straightforward. And then annual reports, again, that's not really relevant for you. I work with Dan, he's great with the annual reports, so you guys don't need to worry about that.
Right. Okay, thanks so much for walking us through that.
Yeah. I just do want to highlight, I have a hard stop at 10:10.
Dylan, I think one of the things that might be helpful is if this may trigger us, a bunch of different people getting together and talking about what opportunities could be pushed forth faster. And the follow-up with you would be very helpful. I think would be, as you've always, Dan said, you've been very helpful, and you've been incredibly helpful to me as I've been asking the questions and getting up to speed on some of these things. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I think the good thing is you have time on your side.
But you'd said you think that it's possible to get the climate leader done by June, but it's a real stretch to do it, to get it by this point in time. It would require an awful lot of pieces to come together. Uh, Dan, do you think do you think from your perspective, do you think from what you were aware of in terms of the requirements for that, is that something you think would be possible if there's some volunteer help as well on things that would be making life easier for you and Brandon?
I'm not sure I followed all of it. I apologize. I would be reluctant to comment right now. I'd have to look at it in greater detail, but we're going to do what we have to do, I guess is the bottom line. I don't want to overpromise, but we're going to work with you to get this done. So we can talk offline.
Are there any other questions at this point? Okay, I think that was incredibly comprehensive and helpful for all of us who have been trying, who want to understand some of the grant opportunities and be helpful. Dan's done an amazing job, and so has Paul, and the planning department, and Brandon, and so forth. Everyone working together. It's so impressive to see Lincoln in the way that the town works. So thank you for all of your help.
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to help. And if there are any further questions, just Colette and Scott and Paul Schwab have my email. I'm happy to field any further questions offline.
Wonderful. Colette, did you have any final thoughts?
That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Dillan.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for hosting me.
We really appreciate it. You take care.
All right, bye.